Justin, we're going to get from Sinclair Community College in the automotive program. I wanted to give you some information about prepping your vehicle for winter, and I got a few things I want to go over. The first one right here is some windshield washer solvent that we'll be using in our video later. The next one is wiper blades that we'll be using to replace on our vehicle. A hydrometer here to check coolant and antifreeze freezing point. Tire tread depth gauge. Digital tire pressure gauge. And an old school analog. When you're coming in contact with any chemicals that you're unsure of or any solvents and stuff that can get on your hands, it's our recommendation here at Sinclair that you wear these. Of course, there's going to be some people that may not, but this is our recommendation to keep you out of harm's way. The first thing that we're going to look at is adding additional windshield washer solvent. One of the things that I would recommend is a good winter grade windshield washer solvent and a name brand or high quality solvent that you get from a reputable parts store. But you're going to fill it right up to about the top line here. If you spill some, just go ahead and use some rags, wipe it up, should be good to go. So one of the things we're going to get ready to check now is tread depth of your tires. And of course you'd want to do this of all four tires, and this is a good idea to do right before winter, of course, when you're going to have low traction, possibly in some situations. But this is a tool, this is a tread depth gauge. This is measured in 30/2 of an inch. This is going to be used as a way or a method to measure across the tire in a couple different spots to make sure that you have adequate tread depth. So what we're going to do here is we're going to start with the depth gauge pushed in, and we're going to set this flat surface across the tread lugs and push down on the tread until it bottoms out. Find out what line lines up with the indicator on the bottom of this right here, and it's going to be approximately 6 to 7/32 of an inch. And spec currently, minimum spec is usually around 4 to 30/32 of an inch. It's my recommendation that if you don't feel comfortable with doing some of these service procedures, that you contact your local repair facilities that you've built a strong relationship with and that you trust that can do these service precautions yourself. But these are some hints or tips that we would like to provide for you or for those consumers that are out there to try to do it yourselfers. So the next thing we're going to check is tire pressure on all four tires. And what I would also recommend is if you have the possibility to always check your spare, because those of you that will be traveling, it's a good idea to make sure that your spare is also checked as well. We'll also do a segment later on tire pressure monitoring and a pesky light that comes on during the winter. First thing in the morning when the car is set outside and then goes out, maybe on your drive to work or drive home in the evening. So we'll do a following segment on that. First thing that you want to do is find your valve stem cap here and pull it off. And you would want to know what your spec is on the vehicle before you proceed. And on this vehicle, the specified range is 35 PSI. And you can find that either in the driver's door jamb on the placard. The other thing is you can look in your owner's manual, which is always a good resource. In some cases, there might be different tire options and wheel options, so you want to make sure that you have the right tire pressure for your vehicle and tire and wheel size. So we have a pencil style that is the old school style, I'll call it. The problem with these is, in my opinion, with our new tire pressure monitoring systems, is these are just not accurate enough. It's a good last resort, in my opinion, if you have no other option. The preferred method that you can pick up for $5 or $10 at a local parts store is a digital one. These are a lot handier because it's going to tell you basically down to the 10th of PSI of what you have. So what you're going to do is take this on, hit the red button, press it on over the valve stem, hold it, and as you can see, we are at 22 PSI, which is low, and that a lot has to do with the cold temperatures. So this is a reason why you'd want to be checking your tire pressure on these vehicles before winter hits. So in the pencil one, this has a telescoping gauge that will come out. When you're getting ready to use it, you want to push it in all the way. And again, this is the one that I don't really encourage you to use, but if this is what you have, this might be a last resort. It's just not as accurate, basically, with our newer vehicles. So you're going to press it over. And of course, if we go to the PSI here, it shows about 34 PSI, which I find hard to believe. So this tool right here is two tools in one. It also serves as our air inflator or air chuck for this vehicle. This one has 24 PSI. Our digital pressure gauge had about 22 PSI. And then our pencil type gauge had about 31, 32 PSI. So this just reiterates that you want to have a high quality, good tool that is a known accurate tool as well before you check this. And so this spec is 35. We're going to go ahead and air that up to 35. And it's important that when you're doing this that you get pretty accurate on this. Now that I've overfilled this, I'll have to let some air out. And so we're going to call that good for right now. We could probably get down to the 10s within 35 PSI. I feel good about that. The next thing we're going to check is the freezing point of our coolant. And this is super important before winter comes in and we get to those 0-degree days, because what can happen is if we have coolant that freezes or we have water in the engine that freezes, is So we can have issues with blocks cracking, cylinder heads cracking. So what we have here is a very basic tool. It's a hydrometer. It can be bought for less than $15 at a local parts store typically. It's going to have a Fahrenheit scale and a Celsius scale for those. It's used for ethylene glycol coolant. One of the most important things before you do this is that the engine must be cool or cold to touch. Absolutely, you cannot perform this procedure with the engine hot or warm. Ensure that the vehicle is at what I'd call room temperature or outside temperature when you perform this procedure. If you don't feel comfortable with that, again, you always take this to your local repair service. This is our coolant overflow reservoir bottle on this vehicle. This is where we'd be checking it. Some vehicles might have a radiator cap up front that you would be using. I'm going to go ahead and take this off. Set it off to the side. You're going to take your bulb, squeeze it, insert it into the reservoir tank. Make sure that you have enough coolant that it will fill up your reservoir here that you're going to be using to check the coolant on your tool. And I'm going to pinch the hose, and this is a good idea to have your clothes or your gloves on because the coolant, just to keep the coolant off of you. In addition to this, it'd probably be handy to have a couple rags handy when you're doing this. You want to make sure you're at the fill line to get an accurate reading of whenever you're measuring the freezing point. I also have the hose pinched off down here. And what we're going to be looking for is the floating needle that's going to show us where we're at. As you go ahead and finish this procedure, you're going to make sure that you put your cap on. It should be hand tight basically when we're done here. And there it stops and we're good to go. One thing that you want to make sure that you're aware of is if you're looking at your reservoir and it has an indicator where it says full cold temperature, because that's when we're going to be checking this, is that you want to make sure it's at that level. If it's below that, that's when you need to consult your local technician about how to remedy that problem. One other item that should be checked during the winter months is, of course, the battery condition. In some cases, this is something that a consumer might not be able to check without the proper tool. In doubt, one thing that you could check is by looking at the top of your battery. Batteries on typical will last about 4 to 5, 6, 7 years possibly, depending on the battery. If you look at it, and let's say that yours is from around 2011 and it's now 2017, even though that the battery seems to be working okay now, it would be a good indication that's probably time to go ahead and replace that battery. So the next thing we want to talk about is replacement or service of your wiper blades. Of course, that's something that is very common during the winter. What we'll do is here show you how to check them by using the mist function with the key in the on position. Look for any streaks across the glass. And if there are any streaks or they look to be dry rotted, that would probably be an indication that you probably want to replace them. This is one of those items that's usually cost effective enough that you could replace them before any winter, probably once a year or once every couple of years. When you have a heavy amount of ice on the windshield, it's not recommended that you use those as an ice scraper. The better thing would be is to start that vehicle up, let it run, get it up to operating temperature, turn your defrost on, actually allows some time to operate, or go outside and actually physically use an ice scraper indicated for the windshield. Right here, you can see a big chunk missing from this one where a customer probably used it when there's a heavy amount of ice on it. So this is what caused us to deem this one necessary to replace it. These are just some quick tips that you guys can look at as consumers or students or people of the public on your own vehicle. A good blanket in the vehicle, a good ice scraper. Those are some other things to have. That way, if you do get stranded, it would be handy to have those if the vehicle becomes stranded on the side of the road. So this is Sinclair Automotive signing out. Thank you.